2018 Park Board meeting. We have a lot of things to discuss this evening, and I'm glad we have a full house and mostly a full Park Board, so that's always good to see. We have a couple main agenda items tonight. We're going to talk about the Green Issaquah partnership and the dog park, which is finally now at a point where we're going to try and make some recommendations here this evening. So with that, I wanted to put out, everybody have an opportunity to review minutes from our last meeting. So are there any comments or corrections? Not. I have a motion to approve our minutes. Someone?
Move that the minutes are approved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. So, we have a few people here from the community, which is always nice to see. I'm going to change things a little bit this evening because we have an action plan for the dog park, and I'm going to have public comments right at the beginning of our meeting. I'm not going to have an opening for any comments later, like I've done somewhat in the past. So we're now at a point for public comments. So if you would like to share anything about anything relating to parks, I assume most of you are here maybe about the dog park, but now's the time to present yourself. You could just please stand at the podium, state your name, your relationship to Issaquah. Given that we have a lot going on, if you could try and keep your comments to within 3 minutes or so, we'd appreciate it.
My name is David Reamer. I live up in the Woods neighborhood. I've lived in Issaquah for about 8 years. It seems like I've been advocating for the dog park for about double that, although I think it's just been about 2.5 years. But I just wanted to thank the mayor and the council and Jeff and Jennifer for driving this process through so many more levels than I thought would have to go through to get the park approved. But it feels like we're getting really close to the finish line here. And I just wanted to come to this meeting and advocate to the Parks Board that this community is really ready for this dog park in Tippets. I don't know why, but I've been kind of defined as the dog park guy by my friends and family and neighbors. So whenever I'm at the health club or school events or whatever, everyone's asking me, what's going on with the dog park? So I try to update them the best I can. But I can't tell you how excited people are to activate this land at Tibbetts and use it and walk down from Squawk Mountain, bring their dogs and have a place to run where they don't have to go to Robbinsville, they don't have to go to the Highlands. They really are excited and they're ready for this thing. So I hope you guys will recommend to the mayor and to the council that we move forward with it. I know that Jeff and Jennifer have done a ton of work getting feedback from the community on designs and site selection, and it just feels like everything's kind of come to this pinnacle. So I just wanted to come in person and say thanks again, and I hope you guys will recommend moving forward with it, with all the work that's been put behind it, and all the community that's really ready to use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share comments? Corey was here and was going to want to talk. Is he stepped out for a minute? Or?
He's outside with Mary Lou.
Yeah, you might give him a holler if you would, Chris.
Says he's good.
He's good? Okay. Anybody else? If not, we'll move on. Thank you. So, looks like Shantae, I guess you're going to run the show for talking about Green Issaquah.
I'll do a quick intro
Jeff.
and then pass it over to Shantae. It's great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Excited to provide this informational update on one of our work plan items this year. Green Issaquah is something we're launching with our partners at Forterra. As you all know, one of our department responsibilities is to take care of and to steward all the publicly owned land, in particular not only our parks but our urban forest areas. One of our operational goals we set forth in our park strategic plan was really looking at ways, creative ways, multiple ways that we can increase our resources and allow ourselves to get more strategic when it comes to managing our urban forest. really the urban forest is not only our open spaces and natural resource lands, but as well as some areas within our parks, within our developed parks that are forested, and our street trees. This is going to be in its entirety really a multi-pronged, multi-year effort. But I think this partnership that we've launched with Forterra is really one important step for getting this work going. Joanna Nelson is here with Forterra to introduce you to what the Green Cities Initiative is, what Green Issaquah means, what it will mean for us, some of the work we've endeavored on this year, and really some exciting work that we see spilling over to next year with really taking our very interested community and our very somewhat active volunteer program and multiplying it in some pretty exciting ways. So, Joanna, take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So again, I'm Joanna. I'm with Forterra, and the Green Issaquah Partnership is a program dedicated to restoring Issaquah's forested parks and natural areas. And I'm going to start off just talking briefly about Forterra. Well, raise your hand if you've heard of Forterra, or formerly Cascade Land Conservancy back in the day. Okay. So our organization has evolved quite a bit over the past 30 years. We started out as a traditional land trust, so we hold land and conservation easements, and we've evolved to really think about how, as our region grows, as more people are living in this region, how do we grow and continue to make this region livable and viable and sustainable? So today Forterra is dedicated to securing places, whether it be farms, forests, urban parks, and taking care of those areas that are keystone to a sustainable future for all. And I could give you an hour presentation on all that we do, but I want to hone in specifically on a program that's near and dear to me, which is our Green Cities program. So let's take a step back. Go ahead. I wanted to point out that when we talk about urban forests, just to sort of remind ourselves that urban forest is all of the trees within a community or a city. So that's your backyard trees, trees along a street, trees in a schoolyard, and trees in our parks. And all of those collectively make up your urban forest. And you're going to be hearing at some point also about the canopy cover assessment and results of that. And that's really, again, all of the trees. And what this program is really honing in on is specifically the trees found in what we call forested parks and natural areas. So there's many benefits to all of these trees across our cities, and we need them to have good quality of life. I'm sure many of you have heard of all these things, or you probably wouldn't even be sitting on a parks board if you didn't believe in the value of trees in our parks. But you know, a big one lately has just been the mental and physical health benefits of having connections with nature. So you're very lucky to live in a city like Issaquah that is surrounded by beautiful access to nature. But of course we need that also for clean water, salmon, other wildlife, and clean air, all the things we need in a city to have a healthy life. Does anybody disagree with these values of trees? Okay, great. But if we look a little bit closer and zoom in and what we're seeing in our forests and natural areas, they're at risk. We're at risk of losing those benefits due to the current state and condition of urban forests throughout the Puget Sound. Anybody know what's happening here in this picture? Yeah, the dreaded English ivy is taking over the forest and climbing up the trees, killing the trees. But we do know that we can reverse this trend through restoration, through on-the-ground work, and transform these spaces back and grow sort of the next generation of forests and trees. These are sites that have been in restoration for a number of years. We're hoping the trajectory will be to, next slide, a healthy, mature forest, which you actually have a lot of. I'm going to share some of the just hot off the press results of your forest assessment. But there are some places that need work as well. So there has been for decades idea of these natural areas, just, they're forests, they're natural, they take care of themselves. But really, due to the influences and impacts of invasive plants like ivy, blackberry, there's a long list of them. When we're in an urban environment, there are a lot of threats that are affecting the health of the forest. So over time, we're seeing, over the next 100 years, in places that we could be losing significant amount of our trees due to ivy growing up, stressing them out, and you can see in that last picture, we lose all of those benefits, right, that trees provide. Through restoration, we can reverse that trend. There are people here in Issaquah that have been doing this also for 20 years. There's been a lot of work that's been happening, and we can see through the forest assessment that those results have shown great benefit to those areas, places where people have been doing this work. So the goal is to, over the next 20, 30, 40 years ahead, to make sure that we are doing the work that's needed now to protect the asset that the forests provide for our communities. So that's where the Green City Partnership comes in. Forterra launched, actually go ahead, next slide. So we've been working with about 14 cities across the Puget Sound in a program we called the Green City Partnerships. And so they all have recognized that these access to these parks and natural areas is an important asset to their city that they need to maintain and care for. So the overall goal of these partnerships combined is to improve urban forest health, to do it in what we call a community-based stewardship program. And so that means engaging community members in this work and making sure the work that we do today has the resources to support a long-term sustainability. When we restore an area, we never say it's restored and done, because in this environment, we always need to be maintaining and taking care of these lands. So this is a map of all of our green cities. So we started back in 2005 with the City of Seattle and launched what is known as the Green Seattle Partnership. And soon after that, there were other cities that were interested, Tacoma and Kirkland. And we were kind of, maybe one city every couple of years. Kent also came on board. And then just a couple years ago, there was a big explosion of interest amongst smaller cities. So we started thinking about also how do we customize this program to make it work for smaller cities. So we were working in SeaTac, Burien, Des Moines, Snoqualmie, and we're really excited this past year to bring on Shoreline and Issaquah. Go ahead and hit. I think they will pop up one more. And then also we're applying this model to Snohomish County and a subset of their forested parks and natural areas. I'll tell you a little bit more about what that is, but I just want to give you some context. These programs combined represent about 15 cities and a county. They serve over 1.6 million people, and combined across the region is about 13,000 acres. That is the goal of the programs overall. There's about 2,500 acres in restoration. So some of these programs have been started 14 years ago. And so we get to learn from those cities that are leading. And in fact, we find that even some of those cities that started 10, 15 years ago are now learning from new cities as they figure out new stuff. So the other benefit of being a green city is that we bring those green cities together about 4 times a year on what we call focus groups, and so city staff, say Shantae went to one, where different city staff can get together and talk about challenges amongst other city staff, and that's a really big value of the program. So when I mentioned community-based stewardship, we saw this last weekend, and it's been in place in Issaquah, and what we're looking to do is grow that. So last weekend there's about 50 volunteers that came out with Mountain Sound Greenway and planted 750 plants. Really, really impressive. And this program is designed to build upon the success of that and really expand it beyond and across the city. We're looking next year to launch a Forest Steward program. So that is where we provide support and training to individuals that want to volunteer and really be champions for their particular park. And so with support of the Green Issaquah Partnership, they will lead events, much like Mountains of Sun Greenway has been doing, but they can do that on their own. And that might look like 3 or 4 neighbors getting together, or it could be larger community events. And so we'll be launching that, and that's something that all the green cities have in common. They all have forest steward programs. There are also great opportunities to get schools involved, youth of all ages, and get service hours. We can provide opportunities for companies, local companies to get involved. This was Expedia that came out to Snoqualmie Partnership, and they had about 80 people for 3 hours, got a lot of work done for the program. And then recognizing that volunteers can't do it all, there is definitely work that needs to be supported through paid professionals, whether that be steep slopes, herbicide application is the best management practice for some particular invasive trees, for example, or knotweed. And then just supplies and tools and sort of expertise and support from staff. So what we'll be doing is building a program and making some cost estimates sort of encompass all of these needs. So here's where we're at so far, specifically for the Green Issaquah Partnership. We were able to secure the resources to do this first 2-year startup phase. The city has contracted Forterra to do this work. And we identified existing partners that have been active in Issaquah prior to the formation of this partnership. So again, Mountains of Sun Greenway, Issaquah, Alps, there's...
Woodland Park Zoo, we
Yeah.
were working with.
Yep. And then we went through the process of actually determining of all of Issaquah's parks, okay, where are these areas, what we call forested parks, natural areas, and mapping them out and actually determining what's going to be included in the program. That was actually a pretty big task because we had to understand ownership and where are their easements, where are their responsibilities, and came up with some of the results that we'll share with you. We're also in the process right now. There's a community survey out there to get some input and feedback on the partnership and the program to help shape it. We'll also be taking, as I mentioned, some of the information we're gathering and put together a cost assessment. So thinking about typically over the next 20 years, if we were to set the goal of restoring all of Issaquah's forested parks and natural areas, how much would that take? How much money will it take? How many volunteer hours will it take? So we have some cost models to help make those projections. And so we're in the process of gathering all this information, and we'll be plugging it into a 20-year plan that we hope to have, draft ready right around late January, maybe early February. And again, mentioning starting in 2020, we'll be creating that on-the-ground forest steward program. And then the rest of the efforts are ongoing. So, next slide. So I wanted to share with you some of the forest assessment results and just really how we go about this first step. So as any good plan, we need our baseline information to understand what is the current state of Issaquah's forest. And again, there had been a lot of restoration done, and so this helps capture where are those sites at. And so we identified all of these parks that you're seeing. There's a lot of little parcels with little names. It's very hard to see on this map. But if we go ahead, these are all the parks that are included. Then we worked with a forestry consultant to do what we call as a forest health assessment, and it's really a rapid assessment. So they go out there and they cruise all of the parks that were identified, and then they collect a bunch of data, some of which we then plug into this matrix that you can see up here. And so what this tells us is it helps us look at priorities and understand the state and condition in 9 different categories. So along the bottom, in that sort of pink, purple, dark blue, along the bottom is invasive cover. So that's low, medium, and high. So low is like very little, 5% or less of invasive plant cover. As you move to the medium, it's 5 to 50, and high is 50% or more. So again, very broad categories. And then if you move up the side, that is a value given to the tree composition. So at the very top, that darker green, that is your highest value tree composition, again, medium and low. And the numbers that you see in these boxes reflect all of the acres. So I think it was about a little over 1,700 acres that were assessed. And once they got out there, you can see the brown areas. Those were determined to be hardscaped or landscaped or like mechanically maintained. So what this program doesn't do is support trees that are mowed around or flower beds or anything developed like that. These are more of the natural areas. And so they went out and mapped all those and excluded any, ponds, water, hardscape. And so that's the brown. Ball fields.
In this case, that's Central Park, and the map to the right. So you'll see, synthetic turf fields are the brown area, and some of those other developed areas of the park, Black Nugget and Grandview as well.
So the good news is that you do have a fair. So I have to point. It's too hard. So these acres, so this all equals about 1,500 acres if you take out the landscaped and the water areas and the ball fields. And so you have about 521, which we call the best. Okay, so that's really high tree canopy composition. Think of your mature evergreen trees, and very low, for 5% or less. So this is what we want to move everything up to, if that makes sense. So this is your worst case scenario. So this is 50% or more. Think of your big patch of blackberry and very few trees growing. That's like this little area. If anybody's ever been out there, it probably looks pretty bad. Actually, that might be there. And so also with all of these associated are cost, right? Like this is going to be more expensive than that. This still needs maintenance because we want to make sure that these really high value areas and forests are actually relatively healthy, that they don't start to drop down, that we don't start getting more and more invasive cover. So with this model, we do consider a lot of other factors, but if you look at the health of the forest alone, you actually want to sort of look at this area and this area, because these are the really high value forests that have a lot of invasive plants in it. We only have 1 acre of those, so that's actually not bad. But this area too, right? 60 acres of really high value forest, but it's starting to have more invasive. So let's go there before we start spending all our time here, because how much worse, can that area get? And then I thought it was really interesting. You have almost half, a little less than half of your acres in this yellow category, which is very low invasives and a medium tree composition. So there's possibly some opportunities for very little effort and removal to replant and plant some more trees and get some more canopy in there. But all this needs to also depend on, we might have some wetlands or other reasons that might limit the amount of trees that you can plant in an area. So are there any questions about how we do this forest assessment? It also gives us a lot of information about steep slopes, so we'll be comparing of these areas, how many are steep slopes, what areas would need to be done by contractor crews and that kind of thing. There's no wrong question. There's no
So this is just for the Highlands?
Oh,
This
okay.
picture,
Good
or
question. Yeah,
is
so
it-
this is just one snapshot, and we have, I didn't put them all up there, but essentially we have maps with that information for all of those parks that are included.
And is it pretty are there similarities in the city, or are the different neighborhoods pretty different?
That's actually a really good question, and as we dig into the data a little bit more, I mean, you'll be able to visually see it pretty quickly, and you all will be a lot more familiar with the neighborhoods than I am. But I mean, there's definitely places where you tend to see more of the dark green, which is that mature evergreen forest, and then there's just definitely places where you see a lot of that yellow, which is again that sort of medium tree canopy. But I haven't looked at it comparatively to say, okay, if you were to do that same matrix by neighborhood to see,
Or just in the whole city, like with all the data? You haven't done that yet either. Or was that?
This is the whole
that,
data.
The
Yep.
triage category
That
is the
is
whole
just-
data, and
Yes,
we're just visually
it is.
looking at one neighborhood.
Exactly.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
I
you.
didn't make that super
Sorry.
clear. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Got
the
it.
full 1,540 acres. If you add all of that up, that's all of the city.
Okay,
Mhm.
great, thanks.
If I could add real quick, yeah, as an example, you'll see all 9 of the maps. So the maps are really a way to break down or just show this representation of what the triage represents parcel by parcel. I think what's interesting, and as you take a look at it, there are some distinguishing factors. There are some neighborhoods or areas that maybe have been more threatened by invasives for a number of years, where we're seeing, like the orange area, right? Those 70 acres aren't just, they're somewhat spread all over, but there are some concentrations. I think one immediate example, if you've been near Mine Hill Trail, down just south of Newport Way as you're heading down sort of the Issaquah Creek area, there's a high concentration of invasives that have, and you'll see that represented in the map, right? And so this method, this approach is very helpful in us, as Joanna said, really working with Forterra, and how do we start to get really strategic about what we need to prioritize and most immediately target. So.
Are the power lines areas included in this? Is that what the big purple is,
Yeah.
the big problem area?
Yeah, we were just talking about that today, and we might consider, since like I said, these are the results we just got, and we only just talked about them today. So that might be something we consider, because there's only limited, you aren't allowed to plant in those areas, and so we might need to control the invasives, but we might decide to pull them out, or at least call them out to see how many acres that makes up, because if that affects, your costs and all of that, and it may be something that would fall under another category of management than this
Yeah.
program.
Yeah, I would just add, I think it's good news, bad news, right? And that some of our highest areas of invasive are areas we don't necessarily maintain. So those are easements. These are the power line easements that are maintained by someone else, even though we own them, right? And so how we co-manage, or at least how we encourage them to be managing invasives, how we make sure, in particular, think of that power line as it goes through Tradition Plateau, right? So we have this forest area that we want to keep healthy. It's really going to be our strategy. We might not be removing invasives in the area, or we can't plant trees directly under the power lines, but how do we make sure we're managing that edge, right? That forest edge is going to be critical. So, yeah, I think that's the refinement of taking from the data, as Joanna said, to the actual plan that we'll see. How do we develop some of those specific strategies?
And I forgot to mention that the focus was on parks and natural areas that the city owns and manages, or has a management responsibility. So we did not include the state park or any other agency lands that fall within the city.
So those are important. Again, I think step one, bucket one, is we've got to be good stewards of the land we own, and we're responsible for maintaining.
So given that, is there any future discussion with the state or DNR departments about having some kind of a collaborative approach, with the lands that they own that surround the city?
I certainly think that will be a recommendation within the plan, since it's such, you all are uniquely positioned to be this, just at the foothills of all this amazing forest land. And I know, for example, I don't know, actually, is there that much King County adjacent land? For example, they have a,
Cougar Mountain.
they've done this same assessment for all of their lands. They use the exact same protocols. They help develop the protocols. And so we are kind of speaking a similar language, which is nice. And then thinking about DNR land, certainly, I mean, we'd love to have other agencies utilizing this, or oftentimes I'll have another management strategy, but if, like Jeff's mentioning, if two neighbors are working together, then we can make sure that oftentimes the spread is coming from the more urban areas, so the work that Issaquah is doing is going to help protect those areas. I would say, since there's so much resource to manage here, that was also my recommendation, to try and keep the scope within what the city manages. Versus there are some other cities, even of this size, that have a much smaller resource to manage. I've worked with other cities that maybe only have a couple hundred acres, and you all are managing 1,500+ acres. And so for them, it might have been more of like, okay, what's the opportunity here to work with other school district land and other parts, but this is a huge resource. So I say tackle and start this, and then once that's successful in moving, thinking about how you can extend that to other agencies.
Yeah, I would our collaboration with our other public agencies, the state park, DNR, King County, has long existed and will continue to exist. I think as we take this work and really, I think, just further our resources in our responsibility here, yeah, I think this just further enhances that collaboration with those other partners. So.
Yeah, but you're going to want to make sure they're being good neighbors too. Right?
Yes, exactly. Invasives
Yeah.
don't know boundaries.
Any other questions about the assessment? So another key component to Green City Partnership, something that they all share, is they all are measuring and tracking performance and measuring back on the goals. And so you can kind of hit them a few times. So we're tracking annually the number of acres, invasive removed, acres put into restoration, number of trees planted, and reporting that out every year so that we can kind of go back to sort of our benchmarks and see where we're at. And if we missed it, if the goal was by 5 years in to have 150 acres in restoration, and that's not happening, okay, let's look at what we can change and how we can adjust our course. Same with volunteer hours and number of youth engaged and that sort of thing. So these are all, this is something that every city tracks, and one of the requirements we have as a green city. So we set up databases and systems for that as part of the program. So everybody's tracking things the same way. And then there's just a great opportunity here to create a brand and a name for this work across the city. And I always like to say it's not necessarily who you are, like who you're working with. It's more where you're working when it comes to the Green Issaquah Partnership. So if you go back to that map, if anybody is standing in one of those places and doing something like planting trees or removing, whether you like it or not, you're helping for the goals and you're part of the partnership and you're working towards that. And so there's a chance to really bring people together under a common goal and market it as such. And so we've only just begun with we have a web page right now, but that can grow with time as we get established and have that become more robust. But you'll see we'll have a chance to brand things, and we will be sending out monthly e-newsletters once we get a growing list of volunteers so that they can stay engaged and just have a one go-to place for anyone that wants to get involved in the program, which will say, hey, there's Mountain Star and Greenway events here, there's a Forest Steward event here, the city might be leading an event over here, so bringing all of those partners together. Yeah.
Thinking about public involvement and how much of our land is private and HOA driven, and is there any way we could work in incentives for HOAs to kind of buy into this and commit to sort of landscaping in a way that supports our mission here?
Yeah, I think that would be, usually a goal of these partnerships is to educate individuals and homeowners as well about how they can be good stewards of their land. That extends to the homeowners associations for sure. I also see a really great opportunity to be able to spread the word about these programs through those HOAs. And we've had some examples of working with HOAs in other cities where they've actually contributed to the restoration even outside of their lands because they see that as a really important part of the community that they've established there. So I definitely think that would be a great opportunity. If you guys have any connections, contacts, and because each of those you got to find the right person for each of those. I know you all have a lot of those contacts. So I'm just going to end with that. All this work is really for a long-term investment to make sure that we're doing this work and protecting this work and doing it in a way that will be sustainable so that the work that we do today doesn't just revert back. And so that's built into the plan and the program, and it's definitely a long-term investment. It takes a long time to grow trees. And so the trees we're planting today, this is our investment, 50, 60 years from now. And they need to be cared for long-term. So maintenance is definitely something we preach as part of the program. So with that, we have an opportunity for some questions about the program and any thoughts that you might have. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of a healthy forest, I know there's a lot of emphasis on invasive plants, but what about other things, disease, trees that are obviously already damaged, and also they should density. I don't know if there's a point where you need to make room for trees to grow healthy.
Yeah, some of the data, so it is a rapid assessment. It's not a super tree-by-tree assessment. That's a much larger and specific investment. But the folks that were out there, our forestry consultant, do often make notes about where they've seen something that they like if they have seen laminate root rot or other sorts of disease. But it's not a specific thing that they track consistently. But the nice thing is it will show where they've observed that. And certainly that is something to be considered. It also is not going in and doing a hazard tree or risk assessment for that. And oftentimes it will depend on where we're at, and that's up to the city and there. But oftentimes in these larger tracts of forest, we're not looking at a tree by tree health, but sort of the larger stand. And we'll also say that you brought up a good point about the density, and so they do collect some information on stocking and how dense the forests are, and if that would lead to further investigation about if thinning would be appropriate to grow a healthier forest long run. Yep. So do you all have any? Oh yeah, sorry.
So, one of the future concerns that seems to be going on in our state is wildfires. And DNR has put together, I'm sure you know, a 20-year plan for wildfire strategy management. Is there anything that's going to be incorporated along those lines within this plan, to make an assessment and what can be done to help prevent wildfires in this community in the future?
Really great and very timely. We haven't been putting much about forest management as it pertains to wildfire prevention. We did host a focus group around that for all of the Green Cities to come, and we did have someone from DNR come and talk about some of the fire-wise practices. And so again, that's an opportunity to share, but we haven't built it into the plan. Let me look into that, because I think that we always are looking for ways to, as we get new information and new ideas, to build into it. Let me see if there's not information in the data that's collected that could lend itself to some recommendations. And if not, certainly it needs to be something that at least should be called out in the plan. And I found that some of the recommendations, there was no, way to prevent it really, but there are there were some steps and some protocols that they recommended, so we can look at seeing how we can incorporate that in, at least as some best management practices. But when we had the presentation, I was kind of waiting for this big, how do we really make our forests more fireproof, and that there's some things you can do, but a lot of it is similar to fuels and things like that. But good, I like that.
Well, it's a big thing for DNR with the Firewise program, and it just seems like with this 20-year plan that you're putting together, that it's a perfect opportunity to kind of dovetail into what the state has already put together.
Yeah.
To use some of those resources to, somehow fit into the city's 20-year strategy. Because, drying is a big concern, as you well know.
Yes. It's a great feedback.
Is there any concerns of the habitat that's going to be living within, or would you want in the forest, or what potentially could exist, or by creating it, or
Yeah.
you talk about the density and stuff. What is good for certain things and not good for you don't want the bears to move in closer, but you still want to have them have a place.
We have the blackberries, and they're not going to come. No.
You're already on my back deck, Carl. You need them closer?
My first year here, we lived up in Miramont, and we had a black bear in the backyard. And being from Minnesota, we just freaked out. I mean, you create the forest. I mean, do you think about what?
Yeah, I mean, inevitably, a lot of the restoration does create better habitat for local wildlife, birds, mammals, by doing the removal of the invasive plants, which aren't serving as much diversity of wildlife. And then I guess sometimes what comes up is, what we talk about, this idea and this goal of like all the forests will be evergreen, cedars and Douglas firs, and that's not necessarily true. There's places along riparian habitat, places where having a mix of deciduous and evergreen is really important for maintaining different diversity of habitat. So certainly having some open spaces and things like that. So it's not a cookie cutter approach, and those sorts of decisions are made more on a park by park basis than they are overall. But
Yeah, and I would just add, our publicly owned forest, which is connected to other agencies' publicly owned forest, is currently functions as habitat, as wildlife habitat, right? So as we've been forming this interest group, the stakeholder group, Shantae mentioned Woodland Park Zoo. They've been one of the partners, and their program, I know Brad has mentioned this, coexisting. I was going to say cohabitating. Coexisting with carnivores. Is a program there that we've been partnered in, and so having them at the table and realizing, hey, as we're putting together this forest management plan, our forest is serving multiple functions and multiple benefits. So I don't know that this enhances or creates more wildlife coming, but they're already here. So what are we doing in managing that as well?
More sustainable wildlife, I think, is the intent.
Do you guys see any potential challenges or opportunities for the Green Issaquah?
How's this plan going to be implemented? Is it the city hiring more people to manage volunteers, or is it a partnership with Forterra, or I guess you're going to come up with recommendations. How does it happen?
It's all of the above and to be determined, right? So we are putting together a plan within our existing resources. Right? Having worked in an organization that launched this where I came from in Kent, it is something that multiplies our effort with volunteers and with creating these stewards and really maximizing our efforts there. Something we're proposed in our 2020 budget that was just adopted is taking one of our existing park maintenance staff person and carving out some of their time to work with Shantae in specifically beginning to launch this effort. I think as this either grows, right, we'll have to think what the resources are that are needed to do that. We'll have to be wise with that. I think I'm very honest when I say that as we look at our 1,500 acres of forest to manage, city-owned forest to manage, along with our parks and along with our street right-of-way landscaping, we are stretching our park maintenance resources to a extremely thin level. So I don't know that this plan creates the need for more maintenance. That need is already there. I think it's really I think just daylighting the conversation we need to have in terms of, as we want to really effectively steward, and as this community wants this land to be stewarded at a certain level, how are we able to do that? And so, like I said, to start my comments, we'll put together a plan that says, all right, what does it look like to do this within our existing resources? And we will strive to sustain that. But if we want to grow this, or see growth or see opportunity, we'll have to resource it appropriately.
Yeah, and just to add that, Forterra envisions, we've remained a partner in all of the cities that we have helped start, and that looks very different in different cities. Some cities, after 2 years, and they're like, we got this, we got our part-time, full-time staff person, and then we check in with them and we support and we can provide, if they're like, hey, how did we do this? We came across this thing, and can you tell me how other cities have done it? Or some other cities maybe aren't quite ready for that step and they've chosen to retain Forterra, and so you'll see us more involved in some cities than others, and that's, again, they just weren't ready to build that capacity in-house. So how that looks, there's not a requirement that you retain Forterra to support these programs. Kirkland runs their whole program all by themselves. And but we are always looking for grants and other ways to help leverage the city's investment. And so when there's good opportunities, and we can be a great partner for that, as there we hope that whole partnership piece, right? So other groups are also out there looking for grants and things to get more resources to help support the program.
Yeah, our park strategic plan, along with identifying one of our key themes is our vital environment and stewarding our vital environment, taking care of our active parks. Innovation was another one of our themes, if you remember. And I like to refer to our need for more oars in the boat. And I see Forterra as another oar in the boat. We've got a great partnership with Mountains to Sun Greenway. We've got great partnerships with our other public agencies. I think Forterra allows us as a city and as a community to bring another oar into our boat, another set of resources that have relationships and partnerships and grant opportunities that we can't possibly do this alone. The more resources we get into this community, the more we'll be able to truly be the stewards that we really want to be for our forest and our parks.
I think as far as who to connect with, I think it'll be really important to partner with the schools in a way that hasn't probably happened before. I mean, there are, a whole lot of middle school and high school age kids in this area in the school district.
Yeah.
Who are able-bodied. And need community service hours. But and it's it can be fun work where you actually see that you're accomplishing something concrete, right? So I think leveraging that would be important, and especially to this extent that some schools are neighbor and border city land.
I know we're not supposed to speak of agencies with which we worked, so I'll just, hypothetically, there was a city that I worked for that we, as part of that city's Green Cities initiative, we had a fun contest we had with the 4 high schools in that city, and you'd be surprised how motivated those students became to win that prize, to be the high school that provided the most community service hours. So there's some fun things that can be done.
Have you not already kind of identified most of the organizations in this community that would be interested in participating in this? I mean, I think that spreadsheet you put together.
Yeah, that first meeting we had
Yeah.
back in June with our key stakeholders, I think a lot of them were either came to that meeting or have been connected with via email to get their input, and that'll continue moving forward.
And we've targeted the corporate headquarters that are here, I'm assuming.
And there's always, we don't set the partnership from day one, and that's the only partners involved. And so a lot of these programs have evolved over the years and started out with a core group of 5 or 6, and now there's 10 or 15. So there's always room for new groups to get involved. In fact, it's encouraged.
Like if you have connections to any of the local businesses that you want to pass on along to us, I might not have those names and emails, so that's welcome.
Yep. Exciting.
That's all I have.
It might be helpful if you have a list of the companies that you are aware of in Issaquah that you need contacts for, like just to email that to
Sure.
us, right, to see if we know people.
Relationship.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
It's
If you're
great
looking
idea.
for a relationship.
Great idea.
And there is a survey out right now. If you didn't see it via email, it's on the webpage, the city's webpage for Green Issaquah Partnership. So all of you here, you're welcome to take that, and the people at home that are watching. It's live until December 6th at noon. It'll close. So then that information will help inform this 20-year forest stewardship plan that is being developed.
It's a survey that's really an opportunity to, yes, both inform, but also, I think, just another awareness tool to let those in the community know this opportunity that we are launching into, and that, again, will hopefully become a real ongoing resource for that another oar in our boat.
Yeah, I think it would be good in follow-up to Danielle to have a list of not only companies, but also all the nonprofits that you already have some connections with. So if there's some gaps, we can actually
Sure, yeah.
try and fill those rather than to double up what you already have. Any other comments, questions? Thank you so much for that, Joanna. So, on to our very important topic for this evening of a dog park.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have plenty of time to kick it around.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we. I'll kick this off as well, as Jen now has the toggle, and we'll get the information up. Joanna, thank you again.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving so much time to it.
So, as I apologize that I was at a thrilling budget workshop, work session, was not able to attend the last park board meeting, but I think as that discussion showed, as we presented the flow chart, it really, I think, represents the process that we've been on, the roadmap that we've been on for this effort. I wanted to tonight provide some quick context. I'm going to go to the next slide. Just some quick context for tonight's discussion and possible board action tonight. And what better way to provide context than to take a look at past, present, and future. So just a chance to sort of highlight where we've been, what our really intent and our focus is tonight, and then where we may and we would go next as we move forward. So where we've been. Always good to remember our origin story. And our origin story here, really, that original project goal that we began to lay out with our park strategic plan and that council asked us to do was let's look for a dog park. Let's identify a dog park within our current city-owned system. And the desire of that original project goal was to look for it in a way that could be relatively low cost and leveraged. Leveraged meaning, how do we take funds that we as a city would allocate and maximize them or multiply them, either with a combination of community build or other ways of partnering resources to get that done. And so with that original goal in mind, we set off on a series of public engagement efforts. The first one really focused on site selection. From that site selection process, we then, if you recall, dove deeper into some site analysis once we identified Tibbetts Valley Park as that preferred location to explore, and then that led to conceptual design that we had some engagement on this summer and really just confirmed up with this last this last survey. So in its entirety, we had these 3 phases of engagement that really helped to inform this process as it went along. And we really, as staff, took our cues from that public engagement. And throughout this process, both with site selection, with 73% of the respondents saying Tibbetts Valley Park was rated their highest. It was rated the highest option at 73%. To the feedback we heard as we began to build those conceptual designs with Tibbetts Valley Park, to most recently the survey that was just out that you saw information in your packet, with 80% of our respondents saying, yeah, we really like not only Tibbetts Valley Park, but this blended A and B plan that really resonated with what the community was telling us. We also, in this last series of feedback, if you recall, asked and tried to take the temperature of the community on what's the level of support that we think we have within this community to help build it. And that was really essential and important for us to put together a construction plan. We didn't want to put together a construction plan that assumed the community was all fired up to do certain levels of this project that maybe they weren't. And so that feedback, again, was really, really instrumental in sort of transitioning to tonight, where we're at. That informed project estimate, how we're going to take this allocation of $200,000 to help build this project in combination with the construction plan to get it done. I think what you'll see tonight, when you saw in the packet, is some good news. As staff, what we're bringing to you is it's possible. It's possible to take this preferred site and this concept design that the community spoke in support of, and do it within this allocation of funding of $200,000 that we have for this project. Tonight, what you'll be seeing as I turn this over to Jennifer, as we sort of walk through, we'll be seeking your what you want to do, your possible recommendation for this, for moving forward with construction of this dog park. Where that takes us and where we would go next as we look into the future a little bit. Like any project, once we have a conceptual design, once we have a design, not just in concept, but I should say a design that we want to proceed into construction, that we go to the permit table and we go through permitting process. We would then go to City Council and seek their authorization to proceed. This would look a little different. If you recall some of the other capital projects that you've all been in discussion with with us as staff, if we were to be bidding this out, we would be taking the bid award to City Council for them to authorize and bless. Since this isn't a project that we're necessarily taking out to bid, we as the city are sort of serving as the general construction manager. We still will be taking to council, though it won't be a bid award, we would be seeking their formal authorization to proceed with this. So I want to point that out to you in this introduction, and that you all as the park board tonight, we're not asking for a final blessing to proceed with this. Ultimately, as you're an advisory group, your recommendation would serve as an advisory piece, a recommendation that we would fold into that agenda bill that would be going to City Council once we get through permitting. Then that would lead us into construction. As you'll see with the construction plan, this isn't a 1 week effort. This would be an effort that we would be coordinating both community groups and some community work on the scopes of the project, the elements of the project that they've expressed most interested in. We'd be working with contractors to do some of the fence work and some of the other detailed work. So Jennifer would be serving as not just project manager, but also in a way sort of general contractor in terms of coordinating that work, that construction work that would take place over probably a couple of months to get that done. But again, the good news is With the funding, with the allocation in place, I think there's a plan that we can move forward to get not just a half a dog park, but that whole dog park completed. So a little bit of context there in the introduction. With that, Jennifer, walk us through.
Okay. So I'll be chatting about tonight's items, which are, about the informed project estimate, our construction plan, the survey that was recently out, and some of the results of that, and guide you through. As Jeff had mentioned, we had a long engagement process. We had looked at 3 different concepts that led to this proposed design. This proposed design reflects many features that we've heard in the community feedback from the concepts, which please give us a drinking fountain with a dog bowl and a paw wash station, provides some seating, waste stations, has a small dog area, has walking loops and an open area to throw the ball, as well as concern about what the face along 12th Avenue would look like and what that would be, how that look would be received from the neighbors on the other side of 12th and further up as people traverse back and forth. So this proposed design was out for 2 weeks on a survey, and I know I've had a couple of questions regarding some of the size of the dog park. The area that's highlighted in pink there is 2.09 acres. When you go back to this design, we would be looking at initially working in order to balance our budget and resources, developing about 1 acre right out of the gate about that. However, all 2 acres will still be open within the fence for community use.
And within that 2 acres, that's fully accessible, how we manage vegetation and invasives.
Yes.
We have a lot of flexibility.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. There's areas that, as we move forward, we can further clear. There's other areas. We heard one of the in the community feedback. They also want to keep some of that wooded feel. So there may be pockets of vegetation or areas that get revegetated. But in time, yes, we would try and manage all of the invasives within the site. Some of the dogs, in other dog parks run through them, can create paths. That whole pink area will be open for dog use and people use. Yes?
Can you, as just a point of reference, I have a hard time visualizing acreage without referring to something else. So is there another park in our system that is about 2 acres?
2 acre, a soccer field, a soccer field is an acre. A regulation size soccer field. So imagine 2 soccer fields.
Thank you.
2 acres.
So to clarify, Jen?
Yes.
Because this says the pink area is 2.09 acres?
Correct.
This one thing here that says total dog park area within the outer fence is 2.09 acres. But
So-
you didn't indicate that.
So
that was-
when you look at the developed area,
Right?
we're developing 1.05 acres.
No, I mean, so the total area within the fenced area,
That is 2.09 acres. That is.
but how about the section of future opportunity height?
That is another 0.4 acres.
In addition to the
In
0.2?
addition
Okay,
to.
so it's,
So
so
the
essentially
pink
it's
area-
2.09 usable space.
Correct.
Okay.
The pink.
The pink is 2 acres.
That
Correct.
inner area represents an opportunity for future
Okay.
expansion that
I just want to
would
make that
then
clear.
become a 2.5 acre
Okay, I
dog
just want
park.
to make
Yep.
that clear.
Yep.
So as I mentioned, the survey had been out for a couple of weeks, and in your meeting packet tonight was the survey results. The question posed within the survey was, does this proposed design, which was a blend of concept A and B, which we had heard from the community, does this meet your needs for a dog park at the Tibbetts Valley site? We had 122 respondents, 80.7% of those responded yes, that this did. Back in October, we met with our friends group to kind of gauge the level of community involvement for a community build, what this would mean if we had anyone stepping forward to help install fence or where we might want to best use volunteer efforts, what people felt comfortable with, and trying to work that with how we were going to balance our budget. This construction plan was also provided in your meeting packet tonight as far as how we would phase this, and in working with administration and staff and other departments as well. We're trying to leverage all of our resources available to us to get work done, and we've come up with a comprehensive plan that requires a mix of both city resources, things that will be community build that will need to leverage some additional effort and muscle to get done, as well as there are things that we're going to contract out. And this was very informed by the Friends meeting that we had in October as well. So just real quick, items that we'd look at the city providing would be tree and stump removal. In the plan, there were some logs. The city would take and place those. Also, any new tree installation larger trees that would be required. We'd do some minor grading, some light work. As far as the water line and paw wash station, we'd also be providing those and installing those ourselves rather than contracting those out to a plumber. We'd also provide some soil material here and there if we needed. Also, we'd help with any future revegetation work, some of those outside areas that wouldn't initially get developed. And then also we'd be providing the trash and recycle and dog waste cans as required. We'd be asking the community to help us with invasive removal, a little bit of site preparation, some minor grading, laying out of plants and some vegetation there, help spreading some surfacing, which would be a mix of both wood chips and gravel mix. Also benches. There were a lot of benches identified within the program. Recently, the city has launched a bench donation program, and we'd be seeking this as an opportunity for benches to be donated to help facilitate the seating. I think there were 16 or so placed within the site, so we got a lot of seating places, but we'll also have some logs and things to sit on in the meantime until we get some of those benches installed. We'll also be asking the community to help us with the split rail fence per the proposed concept that was around the center, the internal island of the Future Opportunity Center in the middle. What is not pink in there? There's a circle around that. There's a fence. That's what we would ask the community to build. Split rail fence is readily done as a community project within the city, and it's something that we feel could handle. When we spoke with our friends group, contracting out some of the other fences was really important to them. So we'll get to that in a second. Let me get back to my list here. We'd also ask the community to help with planting installation, any of the new revegetation areas or enhancement areas we'd like to plant, as well as a little bit of soil distribution and future restoration as well and revegetation. We would look at contracting out the dimensional lumber fence, which would be up along 12th Avenue, which responds to the community's concerns about that neighborhood look and feel, that the fence look consistent. Also, we had proposed in the proposed design doing a chain link fence on the western side of the dog park. While expensive, it also helps with long-term maintenance. So we're also trying to balance design and maintenance as part of this. And this was explained in the proposed design that was put out. We'd also hire out any gates and service area gates and access points, and also any concrete pathways, which would be the accessible route getting into the dog park as well. As a reminder, this could also be altered. The Arts Commission has stepped forward and like to contribute to this project. So should this continue to move forward into our next steps, I would work with our Arts Commission to see what could come of that. Some opportunities might be fencing, gates, arbors, other things that might enhance this space, but the Arts Commission is going to fund that work. So there's some variables there.
So rather than standalone art, how could art be incorporated into functional elements
Yes.
of the dog park?
Within the dog park. So more to come on that topic. in balancing the who's helping where and what, we were able to kind of bundle up. We still have some design and permitting we need to go through. That's going to cost about $6,700. We think site preparation is going to cost about $2,700. Construction, we're thinking, which includes walkways, drinking fountains, waste cans, paw rinse station, and soil, about $48,000. Fence and gate installation is really the big expense at $93,000. Plantings, we're looking at about $2,300. Benches and shelter and other trash cans are not being provided. As I'd mentioned, the city will be providing those, so that's not a cost to the budget. We're looking at benches being donated. And at this time, a shelter is not included, though we did hear perhaps in the future that could be a future add to this space. Surfacing is going to cost about $18,000, and we do have some unknowns. So once we do our tax and art contribution for any capital project, which is required, our total construction is around $193,000. We have already spent to date roughly $8,000 on our existing conditions report that was done earlier for the tree identification and the wetlands. So that brings our total project to $201,000. Our allocation was $200,000. So we have about an $1,100 variant right now. In talking with administration and some of the unknowns yet, we feel this is a very comfortable place to be. Knowing we still have some resources in-house we can provide, not knowing how much community effort yet we'll really get to make this happen. We feel this is a really tight budget to be able to get this work done.
So surfacing that you see listed there, Jennifer, that
Yes.
is materials only, right?
Yes, that would be.
Because the labor involved with that would be community
Correct.
work parties.
So when you look at any one of these line items, there are variables that include city provided, community provided, all of that, which is kind of broken out in this construction plan here. Just the details not shown in here. This is more of a roll-up of the total numbers, because there's so many teeny back and forths between the different items.
This is how we would estimate spending those allocated funds.
Correct. Correct.
So when the city participates doing whatever, water lines, whatever, are they paid from that $200,000 fund, or is that in addition to?
Bit of both.
Would be
Bit of both. Some we are taking out of the budget, and some are being out of other labor, contracted labor within the city.
Yep.
So with that, having done an informed construction plan on how we'd spend this, it really brings us to the question tonight before you, which is, do you as a park board recommend pursuing construction of an off-leash dog park facility at Tibbetts Valley Park? Should you say yes, we would proceed in construction in 2020, launch permitting process. As Jeff mentioned earlier in his introduction, we'd seek council authorization to proceed with the city basically acting as a general contractor to do all this stuff. We'd work through construction and have an eventual opening in next year. Should park board go with a no option? One is to explore the secondary site, which was brought up in the site selection process, or we could initiate a new site selection process as well.
Jen, could you go back to this?
Yes.
So there's been a revision that I want to have pointed out to people through discussion and concerns and things. An additional fence around to help protect the lower wetlands has now been introduced into
Wait,
this
Vanna, wait,
plan.
if you want to explain.
That sounds great. Thank you, Vanna. Yes, so down by the parking lot, there's a wetland right at the base, right in there. Because the trail, vehicles would be parking up against the wetland, we are proposing, in order to protect the wetland from traffic, or, people and dogs, to put a fence between the wetland and the path pathway in order to help protect it.
Kind of, it's the center section, right?
Yes.
Same concept.
Yes.
And that's new, right?
That is new, you're correct. And then also the wood chip surface area, when you go back to some of the concepts, there are some additional trees taken out in order to provide more of an open clearing. That was one of the things we heard at the Friends meeting too, when we drafted this proposed design. They wanted a little bit more open area in there, especially since there was a large stand of alders kind of right in the middle of this area here, that they felt would be worth removing those.
That's actually probably one of my greatest concerns at this point, is especially after observing some dog parks here recently, and seeing how that's typically kind of a throw a ball play area, that, you know, for protection of the dogs, you don't want to have trees in that wood chip surfacing areas for them to be running into as they go chasing a ball. So is that wood chip surface area for the most part going to be open?
Yes, it's, when you're out there, you can see there's a couple of trees, but they're rather sizable trees and will be very noted. And it's a nice open area, and there
I mean,
some
I've
of
seen
the
it, but I mean, you know, it's hard to tell from a graphic like this.
Yeah.
How tall stuff is. You got, the green things are bushes or trees, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's, hang on here.
Can I share some concerns? I have
Sure.
So yeah, this is 0.68 acres
Actually,
here, this
acres.
wood chip area. So it's just over a half an acre, this wood chip area, which is rather large.
well, I wanted to, you know, some concerns. I think this is a great thing to have. I know people in the city are excited about a dog park. My vision of a dog park is an open area. I thought when we were going to choose this, that you're going to just wipe it all out to be flat. That's what a dog park is. I wouldn't bring a greyhound or a Dalmatian to this park, because they won't be able to run very far. As an example, I have a dog that really wants to run. I got a couple of things that I checked into just to show some facts compared to other cities in the area. Let's share down there's just one.
Oh, that's
Pass
just
it down
one.
to them.
Okay.
They couldn't do that. And this is just to show just some stuff here and just clarifications, just, you know, to help you think about it. I've been thinking about it. So here's, pass it around over it. That's all one package.
Oh.
One packet.
Yeah, it's just multiple pages. Pass that over to those guys over there, they can see it. It's here, but,
No, go ahead and pass it.
you can share it. Don't, you guys gotta share one of them, so I can bring one back for you two to share. I didn't print out 12 of them, I only printed out 6. But and this is just some stuff that I brought up. Again, we're talking about open area. And I know you mentioned that eventually the 2.9 acres could be all open, but you haven't talked about how much additional cost that would be for that to happen. I mean, there's got to be additional costs over time for that to happen. But that's not my concern right now. But that is kind of a concern. It's $200,000. I can see this being a money pit. It's going to be additional money as time goes to get it really into a really decent dog park that most people vision a dog park being, which is wide open. And there's some examples of that is right here. This is first part here is the site plan. This is from Seattle, Washington, very experienced area. You know, they have a lot of experience. Currently putting in the park right now in Shorewood or whatever, I think it's Shorewood. And they have a template that they follow. But one thing they talk about, first of all, is if you have any kind of paths, like the path that we have on here, that's where wood chips, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not, that is not handicap accessible. You also can't push a stroller on there. That's not a path. If you have a path there, you don't want it of wood chips. You want it to be a pavable path, or else it's worthless as a path. Okay. Next thing here, this is one that's kind of highlighted. Site must not have significant vegetation on large trees. This is one of their criteria. Now, the reason it's one of their criteria is because it must be something important. They must have figured out some kind of reasoning when they do a dog park. They want to make sure that it does not have significant vegetation and no large trees. And that's for the safety of the dogs. I mean, again, I know the people want a park, but when you think about the dogs, is it going to be good for the dogs? Is this really, you know, safe environment for them and what a dog park really looks like. Proposed site must be 50 feet from any property lines. I don't know if that's what we have right now, if that's true or not. Prefer there's no slopes, for surfacing eroding over time. Desired square feet is 5,000 square feet. Highly visible site. And this last statement here says the dog park should be viewable from the outside perimeter. So, I mean, my vision that I've seen of dog parks, of my examples, if you stand outside the dog park and you see the fence and you're looking at it, you should be able to see the dog park. This here, if you're standing outside the fence, you can't see the dog park. It's covered by all this vegetation and trees. It should be a wide open area. And it's not, that's what I don't understand. The other thing, next thing is dog surface. Taking care of the surface. Okay, put the surface in, but you got to take care of it. It's going to be full of urination, poop and stuff like that. How do you maintain it? Well, first of all, if you're going to have a surface, why would you have two different kinds? That's twice as much work. I'm sure you're going to take care of the gravel a little differently than you would take care of wood chips. Why wouldn't you just want one surface that's easy to maintain because it's one thing? You know how to do it? Great. Why have two? That's twice as much work to me. That's what I think. Gravel, if you have gravel, it should only be pea size. Other than that, if it's bigger than that, it's going to hurt the dog's paws. And now we were going to have examples of the ground coverage here tonight, but you didn't bring that, so we don't know. But that's what's recommended from these other cities. And wood chips have to be, it can't be large wood chips because that's going to, again, hurt the dog's feet. Let's see here. One of the most common ones that they use is decomposed granite. That's the very common one that people use for surface. And they also have especially designed artificial turfs nowadays for dogs. Maybe it costs a little bit larger, but that's what happens. Many parks go with that surface because they can soap it down, they can spray it off, they can, and all that kind of stuff. Again, sanitation and stuff, you talk about removal. To me, you're talking about people just pick up the poop and put it in the can and remove the can. But how do you clean this area if it doesn't smell for a year or two from now when the neighbors across the street are like, what's this smell here from this dog park? There's been 2 years of urination on wood chips. I don't know. I don't want to be around 2 years from now when people start complaining about that. I mean, is that a problem? Has anybody looked into that? Grass and gravel are preferred surfaces for pet parks. Grass is not a real, grass doesn't have to be real, and again, gravel has to be a P type. This is the second page. Since grass is, this is examples again from Seattle. Grass is always a viable choice if regular watering and maintenance is feasible. If not, engineered wood fiber from companies such as Fibar are ADA accessible, and unlike regular mulch, is much more comfortable for dogs' paws, as wood chips are smaller, and traditionally the mulch was less become wedged in their toes. So I don't know if you looked at wood chips, if you look at just wood chips that I buy and put in my yard, or have you looked into this Fibar stuff that is actually engineered wood chips that are smaller pieces that are more feasible for dogs so they don't get injured, And it's also ADA accessible. It means if you use that for the path, somebody in a wheelchair can actually go down the path. But you have regular mulch wood chips, somebody in a wheelchair can't go down. And my mother's not going to push, or father's not going to push a stroller on wood chips. That's why. So if you have a path, it's got to be something that can be, people can walk on. The middle section, according to Nora Van Beer, sales marketing manager for dog products out of Everett. Synthetic turf and engineered wood fiber are the two most popular surfaces being installed today. Those are your both great options because they're pretty low maintenance. Again, we don't talk about what's the maintenance, who's going to maintain this, how you're going to maintain it, how you're going to keep it clean and all that stuff. I think that's a huge issue. So your ground coverage, if you're not sure how you're going to maintain it, is really important which one would you choose. And again, unfortunately, I think overall $200,000. I know that's what you have to work with. But I don't think it's enough. I think it's, and that's why I see this being a money pit. It's going to start with $200,000. As time goes, to get it really into a really decent park, we're going to be throwing more money into it, and that's going to make people upset because you're going to propose something that's going to be costing way more than what you initially said it would be. And then in the last paragraph there in the middle section, some places, they just let the area go to dirt. It may be a right choice. We spend as much dog off-leash areas as we do in other acreage of turf and our systems for maintenance because we wouldn't want a large dirt path in the middle of a sports complex. But if it's appropriate for your area, why spend the extra money on that if you have to? You know, I mean, I mentioned natural grass, and everybody's like, oh, I can't do that. I don't know, why not? I mean, you might, you know, dogs aren't going to tear it up if you maintain it. It might be, you know, a cheaper way of doing it. You might have more maintenance and all, but it also depends upon your drainage and everything. Pet waste. One of the biggest complaints about dog parks is pet waste, which oftentimes becomes a deal breaker for neighboring homes and worried residents. Proper surfacing and irrigation are both effective ways to combat this issue. Again, decomposed granite, although affordable, actually, even though that's the best one, it actually creates a bad smell. So it's actually not, in that respect, it's not really a good thing. Lots of dogs means lots of dog poop. This is something you can absolutely count on when planning a dog park. To curb pet waste problems, consider developing a comprehensive pet waste management plan with a professional pet waste removal service. Have we looked into something like that? I mean, do we know how to even do that with the surfaces that you are proposing to put down here? All I think is you're talking about is somebody coming and taking the cans where people are putting their poop into and carrying the cans off. But we're talking about the actual, you know, maintaining the waste management of the actual surface over time. Because you can't pick up pee. And dogs have diarrhea. You can't pick that up. Okay, I mean, so, and that's going to cause sickness on other dogs possibly, which we've seen, I think, in some of the other areas around here. The last little section is from Portland, Oregon. Their recommendations is at least 5,000 square feet. 5,000 square feet was kind of like a standard number. Relatively level, dry, and irrigated area, away from playgrounds, residential areas, and heavy traffic. Close to parking, evenly distributed throughout the city, and to make sure it does not affect fish and wildlife habitats or water quality. I mean, okay. That's about what I have on here. And then I got this picture here. So this is what I envision a dog park. I mean, you're outside the fence and you're looking in, and you see the dog park. It's just an open area. It's not a park with a little open area within the park. I mean, this is, to me, is a park with a little open area for dogs to run around in. But a real dog park for them to run, the whole area is open. It's an open area. I mean, this might be good for small dogs. Again, if I had a Dalmatian, I wouldn't, right here, I mean, where's it going to run? It's going to hit a tree. And then Seattle talks about, this main thing that really stuck out to me was, do not have any vegetation or large trees. And that's, I mean, to be their second point on their thing, there must be a real important reasoning behind that. And what it is, I don't know what it is, but to them, that's a really important, that if you have a dog park, there's no significant vegetation and no large trees. And I see a lot of greenage. So again, the way I see a dog park is an open land. I have concerns with this because I don't see what I envision a dog park. I'm not a dog park expert. I'm just going by what I've seen. And I'm just sharing, sharing this, whatever it decides, it's cool. I know the city, people are excited about having it, but do you care about your dogs? Do you want a dog park that's good for them, or do you want a dog park that's, we just want one, so put one out there. We don't care what kind of ground coverage you have. We don't care if we can maintain it or not. We don't care what happens 2 years from now and it starts stinking up the place and the neighbors don't like it. And we're putting more money into it than we're supposed to be to get it back and to get it somewhere we want it. Just because you want something so bad right now, just to have it. Do you want a quality one, or do you just want something? That's my. And I think the problem here is that the money, $200,000, I don't think it's enough. And it's going to cost additional money if you ever want to get this, what you're proposing, to really be a real functional dog park. And that's going to be a problem over the next few years. So that's my point, Dave. Thank you.
Well, let's go around the room a bit here and see what other people's thoughts are. Anybody want to?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, like not big ones, but when I look at there's 2 entry points on this off of 12th, and I am wondering if it's necessary to have 2, or what the benefit, I guess, of the northernmost, what the reasoning for the northernmost entry point is.
The northernmost,
Off of 12th.
so off of 12th,
Yeah.
that aligns with the intersection. So it's a crossing to be able to come in.
Into a neighborhood?
In its
Okay,
neighborhood.
okay.
Into a neighborhood.
That's exactly what I want to know. Okay, thanks. And then the southernmost one, it doesn't have a label for a like trash can dog waste station. Is that intentional, or is that
No, so they're
inadvertent?
color coded, so this whole thing would be littered if we called out every single one. So the little red squares in there,
Yeah.
in the entry, those would be the waste
Okay,
cans and
good.
bags.
I just saw it on the upper one, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yep.
And then let's see. I think it would be helpful just on this map as a point of reference to actually label the street, so that I saw in our survey that there was some confusion about where this was located. And so it might be helpful just to add a street marker. Just so.
Yep.
I also saw a number of comments on the survey about having a covered area, which to me is of course you would want a covered area. It strikes me as something that it could be a community build, or like Eagle Scout project or something like that. And so I would hope that we would be able to, try to find a creative way to make that a reality. And I would imagine you would want to have some covered areas near every entry point for rainy weather. I also saw a comment about a recommendation for like a fence that would be that you couldn't see through for the small dog area, and I'm just wondering if that is part of this design, or
It is not at this time.
if they're
It would be the dimensional lumber because of its space on 12th. But it is, if you're out at that site, the shy dog area is actually somewhat depressed from the street. So it does provide an element of privacy.
Pressing a little lower.
A little lower
I guess-
grade-wise from the sidewalk. So
I
when you're
didn't-
out there, you get a little sense of privacy.
Okay, I wasn't thinking that the need of that was from the street or the sidewalk, but rather from the area where the bigger dogs would be. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So is it lower from where the bigger dogs are, or?
So in looking at the design, this shy small dog area, excuse me, right in this corner right here,
Yes.
that is fully fenced, and that would have the 5-foot dimensional lumber fence around it. So as part of future vegetation, we can always put vines up along one side, but providing visuals was also one of the things people wanted to make sure there weren't dogs, especially being along 12th. One thing we'd also heard is, making sure there were visuals into the dog park so dogs weren't running out, if they should jump a fence or whatever.
Okay. I have two.
To the comments that Carl made earlier, our expectation and the thought that this is going to be highly visible into this dog park. It will not look like a wooded dog park that you can't look into. We want that sense of natural surveillance and visibility into the entire dog park.
And then I did have a question as to, and maybe you covered this at the last meeting, I apologize if you did, but why are there 2 different types of surfaces? So that was one question that I had, and Carl mentioned it as well. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, it was mentioned in the previous survey that, wood chips was the preferred surfacing from the community. However, there was a sense that some other surfacing might be nice. And so this lower area where the gravel sand mix is shown is really kind of a lower bench. And so we provided a couple of different options for people to be able to have that different experience. Both are factored into the budget as shown here. So within the scope of the work and plan that we could do it, but having a gravel area and some sand gravel mix would would be nice for some dogs, and then other dogs, we also have the wood chips.
So it's not because of the topography of the land, but rather to provide alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the fenced area that is around the future opportunity. So we spoke about that a few meetings ago, about that area being problematic because of a wetlands inside it. Is that the issue, or is it just like a cost savings type of?
It's a cost savings.
What is it?
That entire knob, if you've been out to the site, is full of birch. This is old soil that the city deposited on the site as a storage. And since that time, birch trees have taken over it, and to knock it down would be eliminating a very beautiful stand of birch right now. So to work within budget and to not fully eradicate all of the trees, we felt it was a good area. It also creates a nice little sense of place. It gives a little wooded feel, because one of the early feedback when we were in the site selection process, people wanted a mix of an open area and a wooded feel. And so providing that gives you the wooded feel without having to be in the woods, right? And it also creates a neat little sense of environment where you can be on the lower area near the shy dog and be a little separate from the upper area where that larger wood chip area is, but only by walking up some of the trails or going around. It's really a nice feature to the site.
So if I can add, Jennifer, I think your question as well, Danielle, is there's a bit of budget reality. How much can we stretch these dollars, to get a little over 2 acre sort of usable area, but then have this inner area that should, in the future, we decide to do something with that grading and those birch trees and that stockpiled soil that was done years ago. Imagine, if you will, it creates this potential almost half-acre expansion opportunity, internal expansion opportunity, but that would need to be a future, as we label there, a future opportunity to explore. The 2 wetlands identified, if you remember from the site analysis, are certainly wetlands we need to be aware of and are aware of, but as unclassified wetlands, as we would work with our permitting agency, there are allowances to do something with those, to mitigate those in a variety of ways. It's not problematic in that sense, but certainly
That wasn't
be
the
something we
driver.
have to- right.
So I guess I would just like to say that the city has been looking for a location for a dog park for many years. So I've been on the park board for, I don't know, like a really long time. And we've been talking about it, over and over. And the reason we don't have a dog park is not because we don't know it's a priority, but it's because the location is really problematic. And so from my perspective, this location may not be in my ideal world. It might not look like what you think of a dog park as looking like, and it might not be, it's not, one of the really big, large dog parks that some of our surrounding neighborhoods, our communities have. But it's what we can do, and so I definitely support it. I feel like the city has done a great job in recent years developing parks, and so I trust that this will, have the same attention to detail and be as good of a park as what we've seen come out of the city. I am concerned about, if this is or is not the right type of surface, because we have, as a city, also struggled with surfaces in our parks, and especially with respect to drainage, and we've taken some remediation steps that have been expensive in the past to deal with surfaces that we've then had to, that haven't worked, right? And so the new turf fields that we put in Central Park, not that many years before, we had paid to put, to do the, I can't remember what it's
Green
called.
Shield.
But the Green Shield. Okay, and so as a citizen, that's really frustrating when we pay money to do something and then it doesn't work, and then we have to pay even more money. And I think, do we really need to do that? So I guess I would really want to make sure that the surface is the right surface. And if it's not, then we need to get the right surface from the beginning, because otherwise we're just wasting money. So it would be my big concern. But other than that, I think we just need to go for it. Oh, and then the other thing is that this cannot be the only dog park that we develop in the city. I mean, we have so many people. We're doing such high density neighborhoods. People don't have backyards. Like the house on Squawk actually do, but many of our neighborhoods don't. And all the development that's going to happen in the valley, it's just we're going to have to do these over and over and over again. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Around the room, any other comments?
Question? Given the mention of a concern for greater open area, could the wood chip surfacing area be cleared out even a little bit more?
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly. So
That
this
shows 0.68 acres, right, which is about 30,000 square feet. And so if that recommendation of a minimum of 5,000, which seems small to me, could probably more, we could probably mean 10,000 or 15,000 or something open, then what we would end up with is an open space area surrounded by trail areas.
Correct.
Ample room for expansion. I think Carl's research, and thank you for that research, Carl. Yeah, when you look at metropolitan areas like Seattle, their strategy saying, hey, 5,000 square feet or less, they're really looking at how to incorporate more, sort of these smaller dog run. That's 500 feet by 100 feet. Right? Well, no, it's less than that. 50 by 100 feet. So small little dog runs incorporated throughout. And yeah, when you're talking about 50 by 100 feet, absolutely, you probably don't want a tree in an area that small.
Yeah, the other thing I read in there was that the minimum cost was $1 million for most of the places. I didn't want to mention that because I didn't want to make it $200,000.
Let's not freak us out.
But that's why, again, I mean, I know the budget you have, and that's why my concern is I don't think the budget isn't a lot to work with. I know you're trying to, do you work with what you have to at least put something in? But now, like Danelle brought up, additional things we can do. Well, who's paying for that 2 years from now if you want to increase or take all these birch trees? They ain't free.
So we can get back to Chris's comments, but I think maintenance is I think it's for everybody, right? This is an investment that isn't a one-time. It's not an infomercial. It's not set it and forget it, right? It's wherever we build, if we do it here, if we do it somewhere else, a dog park, just like any other public park investment, is going to take ongoing investment. It is, and so we recognize maintenance on our end. We recognize, as we've talked with the Friends of groups that are interested in that, they're expressed far more interest in helping with ongoing. So we see an ongoing Friends of group that's really going to be instrumental in helping with that. You're absolutely right. Whatever we decide with surfacing, whether it's both of these or whether it's just wood chips or how we surface trails, surfacing is something we're going to have to not only maintain but be replacing on a pretty frequent level. And that's a reality with this investment, whether it's here or anywhere else within our city system.
As long as you know that the public be aware of that, because that's my concern. I've been on, not quite as long as I know, but 6 years, and the complaint I hear over the years from the public is that you propose numbers and the timing, and then you're way off. You say it's going to cost this, and it ends up costing you this. And you're going to have it done in 6 months, and it takes 2 years. And that's the biggest concern a lot of citizens always complain about.
Sure.
They might not understand this here. Again, they might say, "Oh, you're spending $200,000. That's what you proposed." Oh, 2 years from now, they found out, "Oh, hey, now you're spending another $200,000. What the heck?" But if you say it up front, then maybe they understand that, or maybe they don't understand that. But I just, I see that as what most of the complaints people have is, the city with stuff like this is, things are never budgeted properly. It's one of the biggest complaints I see, and I don't want that to happen here because I definitely think, again, $200,000 ain't a lot. You're going to have to put additional money in, and hopefully people are going to be aware of that.
It's an initial investment. There will be future investment in any, whether it's a playground, a ball field, a dog park. It's initial investment. I think Chris had some more.
Chris?
That was it for now.
I have a question. So, a turf field, we say it has a lifespan of 10 years. something, give or take. What's the lifespan of like how often will, you mentioned like this wood chips will have to be replaced, like how often will that happen, and kind of what's the cost component of that?
I think we'd be looking at replenishing the wood chips, replenishing that as it erodes, degrades. I think as you look at best practices, whether it's Beaver Lake Park, what City of Sammamish does, or Robbinswood Park, we're probably looking at every 2 to 3 years. There'd be some degree of replenishment, enhancement. I think where you see dog parks that begin to have those complaints of drainage or smell or whatnot, it may be an area where the city has said, hey, we put it in, and 5 years later we haven't really done anything with that surfacing. So again, that's just an awareness we need to know as we make this investment. There's a 2 to 3 year.
So this budget here has like that surfacing is of $18,000. Is that sort of what that cost would be every few years, or?
Probably a little less than that. That we wouldn't be fully replaced. That's the cost of the surfacing that we would be
all of it.
Again doing all of. So rough order of magnitude. Let's say half of that, right? Again, assuming we've got a friends of group and we buy it and we do a weekend community work party where we spread that, right?
And I was just going to add, sometimes we can get free material too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's a project or there's too much at the place, they're oftentimes looking for places to haul up, or we have even city resources that are looking to dispose of wood chips. So sometimes, you know, we can even get stuff for free.
Depends on the type of wood chip.
Exactly.
You can also speak a little bit about the ADA accessibility. So it looks like you're able to get into the park, and then are there requirements? What does the ADA require in a park like this?
That's great. So we have had some initial conversations with Development Services regarding this, and most off-leash dog parks are supposed to be voice command only. So getting them into and around the lower area, we understand the entire site, depending upon what your ability is. This is not a structure set like any other building that has a different ADA requirement. This is also outdoor recreation, so there's outdoor recreation elements as well. So most certainly getting people in, getting them to be able to access this lower area closer to the parking lot on the northern side there is going to be really critically important for us to make sure people have access in there. And so as we go through the permitting process, you know, this is just rough conceptual stuff. We've got a lot of nitty-gritty detail we need to work through as we go through the permitting process. But we'll be working with our development services on that.
But that grade is conducive. I mean, you can do a path that will go up the
certainly.
hill.
Yeah.
Other discussion, comments?
I might just like to add, I appreciate the research and the comments. I would also just like to give a personal perspective of somebody. I moved to this area a few years ago, but my experience with dog parks is actually quite different, and it is more of a wooded trail experience. And the dogs do run and go back and forth, and you know, even if many of the parks that I frequented didn't actually have that, even the large space. I'm glad we have that because people really like that here. But as far as concerns for large dogs, at least in sort of the experience that I had over several years, didn't seem that the dogs had too much problems navigating, running around the trees from a safety perspective. So I definitely also agree that safety of our pets is of great concern. Just wanted to mention that in my experience that it hadn't been potentially an issue. I also am, you know, really excited for dogs, especially as we continue to urbanize, for them to have a place to run and get out energy, and also for a community of dog owners to congregate. So just wanted to share that as well.
So I have a few things I want to say, and one is actually a clarification that from our prior meeting. So the area that's not wood chipped within the contained fence, we had actually talked earlier about some of the invasives in the trail system would not necessarily be cleared out initially, but over time. But some subsequent discussions have been that we are going to focus on clearing out all the invasives within the overall fenced area. Is that correct?
In time,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
But in the meantime, I think we would also practice some management practices to help keep the existing invasives in a manageable state, not the 12-foot high blackberries that they were before. Right now, they've been mowed, and so being able to go out and twice a year, knock them down, keep them in a manageable state until we are able to get a work group out there to go clear an area, pull the invasives, and replant it. Because leaving exposed native ground is not always best practice, especially on a sloped hill. You'd want to keep some surfacing or vegetation in that area to help with soil stability. So it would be our recommendation that let's clear what we're initially developing, and in time, as we can afford it or as volunteer efforts happen, let's continue managing those invasives elsewhere.
But likely keeping the invasives, if you're out there on site, you'll notice a lot of those invasives have been mowed down.
Right.
And so keeping that mowed down and cleared. So we wouldn't be thinking of this as a wood chipped area and then a dense thicket everywhere else. That's not what.
that
this
would bring
be.
concerns of pet waste
Right.
to mind. People would not have an opportunity to maybe pick that up. And so having that cleared out, not only does it make it more usable, but it also makes it less hazardous. The way I look at this, look at how long we've been knocking this around. Like Danielle says, she's been here over 10 years, I've been here over 7, and we've been talking about it for such a long time. And one of the problems is we just don't have the available land in the city of Issaquah to do the type of perfect dog park that Carl is suggesting you have to, look at. So, I look at this with reservations. It's not perfect, but it is also unique. I mean, when you look at all the other dog parks around, none of them really have the same type of design as this. Maybe there's a purpose to it, but I mean, the way I look at that is not all dog parks should just be built for a long run so that everybody can throw the ball. I mean, there are going to be some of that, but another big component, and what I just saw over the weekend when I went out to look at some, another big component of dog parks is, dogs are pack animals, and there's a social element to dogs gathering and having a place to, enjoy a space together. And that's what I see a lot happening in this type of a dog park. When I was up at Highlands over the weekend, they had this big, huge, long, barked out area. Only about a third of it. There was a good 20 dogs there, and all the dogs were just kind of playing together in about a third of it, and they were all congregating together. And there was a couple people, chucking balls, but that was not the whole, purpose of that dog park that I saw, or that I see, for this type of a concept. So I see this as not necessarily being the Great Dane throw a ball, as far as you can. It's going to be, if you want that, go to North Bend, or go up to Redmond. So I think you have to give some consideration to the fact that this is not perfect. There are some reservations, but we have a community that says 80%, at least the people within the survey, says this is good enough for them, and they want this. And yes, there are some people that don't like it, but we've got to look at the masses here and what is the majority of people want. And so to me, that's a big driver. I mean, and the other thing, for us to make, a decision about this in terms of feasibility is, if we don't approve this, what are all our alternatives? We don't have a lot of alternatives. We've looked at all the other potential sites, and most of which are smaller than this. Yes, they might be flat, they might not have trees on them, but but they're a half an acre, and that, that's just not enough. And then the other aspect is there, the key element to me is the future is in the central Issaquah along, that corridor. And there's just not a lot of other parks in that central area, beyond Tibbetts that could fulfill something like this. I look at this as a stepping stone. Daniel mentioned it. We're going to have another dog park someday. Whether that's 3, 4, 5, 7 years, who knows? That the community will have to voice their opinion about that. But it's going to take a heck of a lot more than $200,000 to create it, and to plan for some future, high quality dog park is going to take time, and it's going to take money, and incorporate maybe more of some of the concerns that Carl has expressed here this evening, and some of the community has expressed. So I just don't think that we can say it's not 100% quality and so we shut it down. I don't think that's to me, that's not the way of looking at it. Does it fulfill 70 to 80% of some of the needs of the community? To me, it does. And so for much of that reason, I support this concept and moving forward. So that's my 2 bits. More comments? Well, it looks like I had a lot more than others.
Me too.
That's usually the case.
Good discussion.
So with that, somebody would like to make a motion? Here we are.
Yeah, I'd move to, I guess, what's your requested course of action, to recommend to...
Move to
To-
recommend pursuing construction of an off-leash dog park facility at Tibbetts Valley Park site.
Okay, so I'd like to move to recommend pursuing construction of an off-leash dog park facility at Tibbetts Valley Park, in accordance with the proposed plan.
Before we second, could we just clarify the voting rules? We've got a couple people absent.
I'm sorry, I should have done that, Chris. We're missing 2 regular board members this evening, Joe and Jeremy, and so that means Marlene and April get to participate in our voting process.
They're alternates, yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, we're not going to be.
I understand, but I had a quickie question of, when do you want to have comments from the audience in general before or after you make your decision?
That's why we had public comments at the beginning of this meeting this evening.
No, never mind.
Not to mention surveys, we've had a couple surveys where a lot of comments have been made and shared with us, to make our decision, to help make our decision.
Yeah, Joe,
I understand.
I'm gonna jump in.
Go.
Joe had submitted a public comment prior to tonight's, and that is in your
Part of the
agenda
packet.
packet as well.
Correct.
So just, Joe, to let you know, that was in the meeting packet that was
Yes, and we did
distributed.
get to see all of your comments in the packet, Joe.
I did?
We got to see them because those were
The
distributed to the
email you
board.
provided to us and asked us to forward to the park board, we
That was
forwarded
included.
Okay, you got to see it.
All of the
All
board
the
got,
park
all of
I
the park.
didn't, but I, as a contributor, didn't get to see it all. You saw all of the comments? All the comments I know about are just me.
So Joe, earlier this evening, you had sent me an email requesting,
Yeah.
and I had sent you a link back.
It was not there. So,
Okay.
need to bring bad news to you.
The survey responses were part of the agenda packet,
Correct.
correct?
They were,
They are, and
yes,
the comment is at the
And
end.
that's,
yes. All the comments and all the survey responses.
and that's available online.
Online
as part
with
of
the,
agenda.
attached to the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
With that being, Chris,
Second.
okay?
Do we have time for one more comment or not?
Yes, you bet.
What's your ideal plan then for the surfacing to come up with something that's beneficial if it doesn't fit the budget? And I think a lot of people are concerned that we really got to make sure the surfacing is something that's the right surfacing to start out with. What is that going to be, and what happens if that doesn't fit the budget? Then what are we going to do? Settle for wood chips, and are you okay with that? because again, one of your main concerns was the surfacing should really be the right surfacing. What happens if they decide the right surfacing is gonna cost an additional $100,000 or $20,000 or $15,000? What is that surfacing, or are you just
Well, I think what I heard
Or are you
was
gonna blow it off and they're just gonna put it in?
the Park Department is recommending wood chip surfacing based on research that they've done and what other municipalities, I think, in the area have done.
So you're okay with that? That's the,
If
the
that's,
best.
if that is what they're recommended, I just want to make sure that, I guess my point isn't a question for them to answer that now, but rather, like, if there are any doubts, then.
Well, I didn't take that
No.
as when you made a statement.
Yeah.
Your statement was you didn't agree with what it currently was, and
Oh, no, I don't, I have no input as to whether that's an appropriate surface or not. I'm trusting that
we don't.
the Park Department has done their research.
You don't care?
I think we care. I think I would say that I trust the people who are experts and who've done the research to it. I think they know more than the park board
Yeah.
on that, and that I would trust that the people
And
who
it-
do their jobs to figure that out.
I would also say that what we're doing is we're recommending that this go now to city council, and, you know, that there's certainly another opportunity, there's always another opportunity to bring this up, and city council, sometimes, you know, they can change their mind, and, you know, it's not like it's a done deal.
No, that's okay.
So-
I just know that was a concern, so, you know, so.
It is a concern to me that the right service be picked the first time.
And I
It's a
think those-
concern to staff as well.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
those
you
can
know,
be
I could
ongoing,
just-
I think those can be ongoing discussions. I don't think that we're making that final decision tonight. You know, this is about moving forward, not necessarily committing to every little.
Oh, no, everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, what the little research I found here, that fiber wood chips, I don't know what that is.
5-bar wood chips are an
You know
engineered
what that
wood
is?
chip. When you see wood chips in our playground areas,
Is that
that's
5-bar?
5-bar. So we're
I don't know
very
if that's what
familiar
you're
with that,
looking
very
to.
familiar with that surfacing.
And then, you know, what I read here, recommendation for gravel or granite is pea size, not quarter-inch, you know. You know, that's, you know, you go with whatever you want to go with, I guess, but I mean, that's just for safety of the animals, you know.
My only other concern before we vote on this is, you know, there's a fair amount of this that's kind of a heavy lift from the community to some extent, and I know that you have some determination that that can be done, but we've also had, you know, some of our meetings that haven't had big turnouts, and you know, what does happen if you go into a construction plan and plan to do something with the community that doesn't occur? What happens then? Do we just stretch out the timeline further until we get enough support to make that happen? I mean, could you talk about that?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So we put together a construction plan, and in this case, I think we'll sequence what a contractor needs to come in and do, when's the right time to have those community work parties to do that designated work. We would estimate a length of time or number of work parties to do it. We would send out that call and send out that invite like any volunteer project, and should, let's just say, those anticipated 3 work parties not get the workforce we were hoping for, and it takes 4 or 5 work parties, then we adapt and work within that schedule. I think what we found, you know, Joanna mentioned the work party volunteer event we just had this last weekend. So our interim activation of the Front Street properties, Shantae led a planting effort that this community loves volunteer events. They love engagement, and we got more plants planted in that 4-hour event than what we were anticipating. So I'm not predicting, hey, we're just going to get it all done super fast, but I think we do a good job of estimating, and I think as this starts to feel more real, it's not hypothetical, and these community work parties are tangible, actual stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see a energy in the community to say, hey, cool, let's go help with it. So something another element we'll have to manage.
Thanks for addressing that. Any other comments? We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of proceeding with the motion, please raise your hand. I guess that looks unanimous to me. So thank you. That takes us to the next step, and now you know what you need to do.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you, everybody, for that. So, do you have much in the way of a director's report this evening?
I've got a couple items, yes. Real quickly, looking at time. So again, I apologize for not making the last park
Turn that back
board
on.
meeting. Yeah, part of.
I'm gonna show you something, so.
Oh,
turn that
that's
back
right.
on.
Part of
I'm
Brad's
sorry.
report is, yep,
I'm sorry.
video. So as it's warming up again, I'll quickly highlight. So I, again, apologize for not being at the last park board meeting. Been a series of budget work sessions with city council. Just last week, city council adopted their 2020 budget. I won't dive into all those details, but what I would highlight is we're putting together our 2020 work plan. Like I did last year in January. I'll bring our 2020 work plan to all of you, just so you have some context and understanding of what some of those major work items are for us. Not all of those will necessarily be coming to the park board, but I'd certainly like to provide you all with the context of what we've got on our dance card for the year. So you can look for that in January. I mentioned the Front Street Properties event, so I won't highlight that as well, other than thank you community and Mountains of Sound Greenway and Shantae for another great volunteer project. One of our 2019 work plan items, this is the last item I have for the director's report, is, if you recall, putting together a plan to address wayfinding and starting to formalize customized, standardized wayfinding signage. So think of trails, pathways, park signage, creating a uniform standard throughout our entire system to help people get around. We went through a pretty extensive selection process. We had a lot of interest from different vendors to help us with that work. We're partnering with economic development and with our communications team in this project. We selected a team that has some great experience with a number of local cities around us. KPG is the company we'll be working with. As we look to kicking off that effort tail end of this year, but that work will really primarily go into 2020. We're putting together a steering committee. A lot of, if you imagine, economic development and parks and just the community groups that those two departments work with. The steering committee is really seeking representation from a wide array of agencies, from Chamber to Issaquah Alps Trails Club, just to express that diversity of groups. We're looking at about a 13-member group that will, again, help be a touch point for that. We will have a pretty extensive, bigger public engagement effort with that wayfinding signage, but within that 13-member steering committee, we would love to have a park board representative. So would love to get a sense if there's someone interested in volunteering in that effort. There'll probably be a group that meets 4 or 5, maybe upwards of 4 to 6, knowing how public engagement works here in Issaquah. But it'd be great. It would be great, absolutely fantastic to have a representative from the park board.
Well, I've already volunteered, but that doesn't mean we can't have more.
That's 4 to 6 meetings over what kind of time period? Like in a month or over like 6
So
months?
we're looking at first meeting being December 2nd, and then the subsequent meetings one in January, 1 February, and 1 March. And then the other 2 Jeff was speaking of might be down the road. There's no specific dates, and when we meet December 2nd, we will set the subsequent meeting dates. So we've asked people to bring their calendars.
So imagine monthly for the next 4 to 6 months.
And would they be structured kind of like these are, or is it, what's the feel of it?
Yeah, they're going to be very interactive. We're going to be working with our consultant team and really trying to, like our first meeting, we're going to be talking about what is successful wayfinding and start talking about some different style types and kind of doing that first kind of vetting at a very high level through that, and then that will help inform our down the road community engagement.
But unlike
so
this,
there'll be workshops, yeah.
Yeah, unlike this board that is, you're taking probably a high level, a 30,000 foot level look at a lot of projects. This is this group's going to take a bit of a deeper directional dive into that specific task.
And these meetings would be about an hour or 2 to 4.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. I'd be interested in doing that.
Great. Thank you. I will send you the.
I know
Will there
Brian's
be-
expressed interest too, so
Okay.
we should probably have
Okay.
see what the group wants to.
Yeah, see what the.
Will this group, will there be any like new signage for parks that come out of this group?
Yes, so the not only looking at, in terms of our public infrastructure and our parks and open space, picture, what's going to come out of this is a standard for trail signage, in and through our trail system, and then park signage as well, entry signs, etc.
So one of the things I think that would be beneficial to consider at least is looking at how we name our parks, because I feel like we haven't been very consistent over the years with if someone sees the name of a park, you don't necessarily know if there's a playground there or a sports field or if it's open space or if it's just natural area. So we name our natural areas in the same way that we name like our playgrounds. And so I know other cities will do something with that, and we did that a little bit, I think, with like our Salmon Creek Nature Run, right, which is like, okay, that's just like a natural area. But I would like to see us, if we want to, consider that first before we spend a lot of money to put signs up. So.
And this effort will be looking at standardizing the sign design. It's not we're not going to see every new park sign done in a year. But your point is spot on, and that actually came up as part within the strategic park plan process too, right? In terms of how do we make sure we're not communicating an unintended, confusing message, calling something a park when there really isn't that sort of.
Right. Do you expect to at
Public
least have a
access
bench
to
and a
public
trash
development.
can, or like what is it the minimum standards for a park?
Are we maybe you said this, like, are there people already on that group that are graphic designers or graphic backgrounds? If not, I'd be curious if anybody has those types of backgrounds, because that's typically when you're doing signage, you'd want somebody with that
Yes, yeah.
background.
Right.
I was going to say, we do have an Arts Commission representative on the work group, the steering committee.
I would just
So
make sure
this-
that's not, I'd make sure that's graphic art, not fine art.
Right, well, and this group isn't necessarily going to be doing the design, right? The consultant and their graphic design shop and graphic design team will be doing the actual design work. Yep. So, great question.
Anything
Some
else?
interest? No, that's it.
Is that good for that program?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess that leaves me. I hate to kind of keep you a little bit long tonight, but we're not going to be meeting in December, so you can take this extra
We're not
5
meeting?
minutes. We're not going to meet in December.
Look, it says here December.
I know, but we're making an executive decision here. We're not going to meet on December 30th
Okay.
Brad's got
in
plans.
favor of the holiday.
It's going to change it right now.
So we will be back meeting again in January. And that's partly kind of a segue in terms of why I want to talk a little bit about my last final little topic here, and that's a little bit about kokanee. So, and we've had kind of a nice segue tonight going into the discussion about green Issaquah, because it's really where I see kokanee kind of fitting in to the big scheme of things with our environment. And how parks fits into this, to me, is, parks is a steward of our environment. And kokanee and the various wildlife we have in our community, is part of that, and we need to be thinking about that. Kokanee has an extra special aspect to it in that it's, has some real cultural significance as well. Kokanee, if you don't know, is a subspecies of sockeye. And the unique aspects to them, at least in this area, is that genetically they are the only kokanee, particularly to the Lake Sammamish watershed. And they have been threatened in recent years. And a lot is being done to try and help prevent the extinction of kokanee. This year so far we've had a count of about 100, which is encouraging that it's better than it was last year and the year before, but it's still a long ways away from actually where it needs to be sustainably. Already some of the kokanee runs have actually are extinct in our tributaries, and so we're kind of hanging on here at the last of it. I've been engaged with the kokanee work group now for several years, and you wouldn't believe how many agencies around the area are participating in this effort to try and save the kokanee from going extinct. As a part of what happened is an emergency management plan by the kokanee work group over a year ago. And a part of that was a number of different things, but they changed recently for this year in terms of a release. In October, there was a number of different things that were a lot different in the past. It used to be always a springtime fry release. They found that for the most part, a lot of these have not really been living. So they've tried a couple different things. This year, they decided to, raise them to be larger fish before they were released, and a lot of different types of release. This year, there was in October a release. In fact, at the boat launch, a number of organizations came together, and the Snoqualmie tribe actually took raised kokanee that were older out into the lake, rather than for them to be getting gobbled up in the tributary as they entered the lake, as one strategy. Another strategy, Wally Pereira, if any of you are familiar with that name, he raised a number of kokanee on his property, and they had a release in October into Ebright Creek from his property. Another event was they actually flew a number of kokanee from the Issaquah salmon hatchery up to a hatchery in Orcas Island, who actually has the capacity to raise these kokanee for their entire lifespan, to help preserve them from, so that eventually their offspring can come back to this area. So those are just a few examples of what changed and occurred, this year. So I just, for the last 2 years, I've been working with a smaller group of people that has worked with an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker by the name of Nils Cohen from Hemlock Productions in Seattle to put together this film by the name of Spawning Grounds. I think I sent out something a long time ago. I don't know how many of you maybe have watched it. But the timing of it is good for me to bring this to your attention as well as to the community, that the film is now, for the most part, completed. We had a pre-release with the Snoqualmie tribe last week. And the release of the film will be made to the public on January 18th at the North Bend Theater. That's the premiere, and then we're going to have some subsequent releases around the community after that. But I wanted to give an opportunity to just play. It's a 5-minute trailer. We have a great technology here to show the film, and I just wanted to share that as we end the meeting. That this is not just about kokanee, it's also about the community and what efforts are being done to preserve a legacy. So you're on.
I got it.
You're on. Can you make that big so it'll take the whole screen?
In somebody else's worldview, this is the Garden of Eden.
Scroll down to full
The
screen.
land, all of the animals, the creeks,
They're under watch.
all of those sacred cycles are gifts. They need to be taken care of. And the kokanee are that unique kind of gift.
Lake Sammamish is habitat for rare native salmon. Lake Sammamish kokanee spend their entire life in a lake system.
It enabled our ancestors to live here year-round because there was that food source. They're very important to our people.
Five years ago, more than 18,000 kokanee adults were counted in these tributaries. This past year, we counted 20.
They've evolved to spawn in these small creeks, which is completely different than almost all the other Pacific salmon populations. So whatever goes on in this lake and watershed, it's our doing.
This area is growing. Green space is making new space for housing.
People continue to keep moving here. They keep building in very, very sensitive places.
Amazon is building, Google is building. The residents of this town have lost out on the economic boom that's been taking place over the last 10 years.
If you move to a place, then you need to learn about the place and its history.
Welcome to my homeland, to my people's homeland.
It's vital right now to be the ones to tell our story. So we're stepping up to that role to carry that forward.
What are our options for action? What can we do to optimize the success of those fish?
I've never been in a project like this where we have 20 plus different stakeholders and partners that come from all different levels of government, all different backgrounds.
We are working together, the surrounding communities around Lake Sammamish, the tribes, to raise awareness but also start actions.
It's been more than 40 years since they've been able to come up this creek. It gives us as a tribe a sense of homecoming.
I feel like we're doing kind of our small part in the whole kokanee restoration.
I love the interface between man's environment and valuable natural resources, and how do we manage the aquatic biological world with these other very real needs? How do we make it all happen?
Their survival is our survival. When the fish run, we're giving everything for the next generation.
It's easy to blame, but we are all stewards. We have to do something.
It just feels good to see people working together on something that's important, and it's a shared importance.
We all are here for the same reason. This is a marvelous place to live.
Their spawning grounds are quite literally in the backyards of the communities that we all live in. And what's neat about this project is we're not simply helping to recover a fish, we're helping to reconnect the community itself with these lands and these waters that actually define the region.
If we can get this population back to stable, that would be a huge success story. And it would show that it can be done. It can be done.
You can see all the main contributors to this film initially, and the City of Issaquah and Friends Lake Sammamish State Park are primary sponsors of this. So, with that, any other comments, new business? Jeff?
I have one item I'm sorry I should have mentioned, but I think it's fitting. So much of this is fitting, right? I mean, these are all, whether it's little bites or big bites, we're all trying to achieve a variety of things, and obviously stewarding the environment's a big one. You heard earlier tonight the tree canopy assessment was another item of our urban forest work plan. We're presenting that actually tomorrow night. I'll be at City Council meeting if anyone wants to join me. Presenting the tree canopy assessment I will make sure to forward all of you a copy of that assessment. So we partnered with King Conservation District. A company named Planet Geo did a fantastic job of looking at our urban tree canopy cover and providing really a wealth of data on where our tree canopy cover is currently, breaking it down a variety of ways. Good news, we are at 51% tree canopy cover, which when you look at our neighbors and other King County cities and cities in the area, we are, that's a healthy cover. But it's, again, much like our Green Issaquah effort, it doesn't just stay static. It's an ever-evolving, ever-changing, organic, literally, reality that we need to manage. So I'll send you all a copy of that assessment.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nothing else. We're adjourned. Happy holidays to everyone. See you in January.